SportsLit is co-founded and co-hosted by Neil Acharya and Nate Sager. Engineer and technical producer, Michael Ella. Executive producer, Neil Acharya. Welcome to SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
And I am Nathan Sager.
Today we speak with 1996 Olympic 100-meter gold medalist Donovan Bailey about his autobiography, Undisputed, A Champion's Life. It's published by Random House Canada, and it's released on October 31st. To understand Donovan Bailey's impact on the Canadian sports landscape, one must go beyond the titles, the things everyone knows, the fact that he was crowned the fastest man on earth with his 100-meter world record at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, the world championship that preceded it. You have to understand the context. What was going on with Canadian athletics in that general time period? What was going on in Canadian sport in that general time period? And what was our cultural barometer as a nation? And how did all of this make Donovan Bailey all that much more explosive? Nate, let's start with Ben Johnson. Even when we hear that narrative now about the steroid scandal in 1988, it's far more balanced now than what we were hearing in September 1988, and that's putting it lightly. But one thing that still kind of lingers is the word shame, and I think we both don't really think that's appropriate to how we felt then or how we felt or feel about it now.
Yeah, it was a gut punch when Johnson was stripped of the gold medal at the '88 Seoul Olympics. And for people of our vintage, it's really seared into memory because we were, impressionable kids coming into, our wider consciousness. But at the time, it wasn't so much shame. It was just a feeling of, someone's being singled out here. And, lo and behold, it's well documented that it was the dirtiest race in history. And people who were there say it was also the greatest spectacle they ever saw. So, yay, dirtiness, maybe. But it just sort of revealed the reality that premier Olympians in that era really lived on this razor's edge of, if you don't take it, you won't make it. And 15 years later, I think a whistleblower revealed that Johnson's American arch rival, Carl Lewis, who swore up and down that he was clean and got bumped from silver in the 100 to gold, yeah, he had positive tests that were hushed up. And that just confirmed what everyone around me in my little, corner of the world in 1988 was saying, often with a lot of, often punctuated with a lot of profanity. That's maybe enough about that, Neil.
The 100 meters is the most popular race in the grandest stage of international sport, and that's the Olympics. So it's the first thing people around the world would think of when Canada was competing on the global stage in summer sport. They would think of that scandal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you wish you could tell the story of Donovan Bailey because it's his story is we read the book. It's compelling enough without even having to mention Ben Johnson. It was just a story that lingered and lingered through, I guess, about 2 Olympic cycles. Now, I mean, when he came on the scene, though, we saw here's a guy who's just a man possessed about maxing out his talent, and and realizing, I've got this gift and I'm, going to use it. To be a world-class sprinter, as he writes in the book, you have to generate a torque that moves through your muscles 10 to 20 times more than your body weight. It just hurts to run that fast. And when it comes to the Olympics, you get one shot at it every 4 years. No do-overs. You don't even get the benefit of a false start anymore. He had those bona fides, but it sort of got crowded out by just the collective, once bitten, twice shy wariness. And it almost, sort of metastasized into a cognitive dissonance. Oh, please, please, please don't be another Ben Johnson. But please, please, please dominate like Ben Johnson did.
Yeah, so throughout his come up, he's aware of this, this lingering cloud, and he's being scrutinized heavily. It's covered in the book by his own governing bodies through constant testing. That's Athletics Canada and the Canadian Olympic Committee. And he's you talked about that drive and that singular focus, but he's also at the same time he's so focused on not having his drink getting spiked, like watching his water bottles at practice, when he should be focused entirely on his mechanics. He's looking over in the corner to make sure no one's messing with his water bottle. And when he's at the club, he has to take his drink with him everywhere. And so Canada goes through this 4-year cycle after Seoul, and they go into Barcelona 92. And after Barcelona 92, Donovan Bailey emerges as this number one track athlete. He's rocketing for gold. He's confident, and he's an unabashed alpha. And he's really like no athlete we've seen in this country. And back to that cultural barometer, and I speak from my own experience here, young Canadians at that time, and, the ones I knew, we were gravitating to Black culture. In the 80s, there's politically conscious hip hop. Towards the end of the 80s and into the 90s, Maestro Fresh West comes up in Canada, but he's not really breaking in the US. And in sport, you're watching the Fab Five emerge, and you're watching their style and flair, their black shoes, black socks, baggy shorts. And, throughout the 80s and into the 90s, we're loving the Blue Jays. But these, guys like Jesse Barfield and George Bell, then you move into Devon White, Joe Carter. But these guys are American. Donovan Bailey is one of us. He's Canadian, he's Caribbean, and guess what else? He's putting Americans in their place. He's saying things a lot of us were thinking for quite some time. He's saying it out loud.
Yeah, and you also have to remember, like, where the timing and the tide was right for this to just be, this huge thing that got outside of its normal reach. When Bailey's Time to Shine came out, it wasn't like the Olympics were, taking place 6 hours ahead of us in Europe, or, whatever the time difference is between here and Tokyo. It was in the Eastern time zone in Atlanta, which had won the bid over Toronto to host. And, Bailey's coming in as the Canadian, the Americans, Americans expect to win, right? Mm-hmm. And this was a case where he had, if it wasn't a gold medal that was so much won as taken it by a guy who, was under unrelenting pressure to do so, with, the scrutiny about, what had happened, stemming out of what had happened in '88, that had nothing to do with him. An ironic coda to that was, for me, came a couple of years after the Olympics. I want to say it was sometime between Atlanta 96 and the Sydney 2000 games. There was this, long form piece in Sports Illustrated that looked at the science people who do, doping control for the Olympics and the International Athletics, Amateur Athletics Federation, the IAAF. And apparently in the trade, Atlanta 96 was actually called the HGH Games due to this strong visual evidence, that athletes were taking human growth hormone, which was not directly detectable through doping the way anabolic steroids are. And so that was the irony, that there's all the suspicion on Donovan Bailey, but neither he nor the other two medalists in that men's 100 in 1996, Frankie Fredericks from Namibia or Addo Bolden from Trinidad and Tobago, ever had a positive test or suspension. You know who did, though? The fourth place American, Dennis Mitchell. He got a ban from competition a couple of years after Atlanta, after his routine drug test turned up high levels of testosterone, i.e., the male growth hormone enhanced by HGH. And Mitchell, I think no one's ever had a good excuse for a positive doping test, other than Ross Rebliati, of course.
But if there was one,
if there was one, this was Dennis Mitchell's. He said he had 5 bottles of beer and sex with his wife at least 4 times. It was her birthday. The lady deserved a treat. Let that digression just, digest.
The lady deserved a treat. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So in the book, Donovan Bailey really lets us in on everything he had going on in his life at that time, around, I guess maybe a year on either side of Atlanta. As a sort of sports nerd in me loves learning how he and Dan Path, his coach, they really just worked to reduce the chance of an injury or just a collapse. It's important to know just everything that goes into the build up to a gold winning, 100 meter, or again, I said 200 meter or 400 meter. It's really got to be as perfectly coordinated as a space shuttle launch. And another thing that I took out of it was the way Bailey describes how Path, quote, didn't care about the noise, and he taught me to think with that mindset.
Yeah, a great part of the narrative, Nate, is his description of his coach Dan Pfaff, and it's almost out of a movie, isn't it? I mean, Dan is not your conventional coach. He's chewing tobacco. He communicates in his own way, but he's brilliant, right? He's a savant, or I don't know what you want to call him, but he's really, as you said, it's great to learn about their relationship and the description of Dan himself. So Donovan tells his story with intent, especially his origin story, growing up in Jamaica on a farm, and coming to Canada. He's a man who knows the audience that will read this book internationally and domestically. He knows that there are people with notions of different things, and he's very clear. He wants the reader to know where he comes from and how he grew up. And there's no gray area. There never really is with Donovan Bailey. We also get to learn about why he had such an unconventional entrance into track, also known as athletics, track and field, by the way, and how he left racing. And to me, that was always kind of a mystery. He seemed to just rock the world in '96, and then I didn't really know where he went after. Now, he did compete in Sydney 2000. He had pneumonia there and didn't make the final of the 100 meters, but it seemed like a sudden exit. So in this book, we find out why that was, and kind of the story after '96 as well. And of course, the Michael Johnson race, I got to mention that too, at Skydome, for those that don't remember. So after that time period, what happened to him?
Yeah, indeed. I still get mad over the whole thing. For people who need just a brief reminder, Bailey won the 100, and then Michael Johnson, the American, won the 200 and the 400. And Bob Costas was like, well, if you take his 200 time and you divide it by 2, it's faster than Bailey's world record time in the 100. And it's just like, well, duh. He's speeding up and there's a curve in the track. And of course, they set up an exhibition race the following year and Bailey dusted him, as you alluded to. Now, in terms of tie-ins with our back catalog, I guess between Donovan Bailey and this book, Undisputed. Last year, we had soccer star Dwayne Rosario. He sort of explored the Caribbean influence in, Southern Ontario culture with us. 2021 Canadian hurdles great Perdita Felicienne came on to discuss her book, My Mother's Daughter. We should mention, of course, as we're less than a year out from the Paris 2024 Olympics, Canada does have a pretty good history in sprinting. The beauty of track and field, I think, more than anything else in the Olympics is, any nation in the world can have someone with that 99.99 percentile ability to just have that burst, or also have the, stamina for the longer races. But in men's sprinting, between the two world wars, there was, Percy Williams who did the 100, 200 gold medal double in 1928. There was also Ray Lewis, who has a park named after him in Hamilton for his Olympic victories. And you always have to explain to someone, no, it's not named after a former middle linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. It's another Ray Lewis. And in the mid 20th century, in the 60s, there was Harry Jerome, who actually probably ran the world's first sub 10-second 100 meters at the 1960 Canadian Olympic trials in Saskatoon. And I confirmed this with someone who was actually there. They didn't have electronic timing yet back then. They had stopwatches. Some of the coaches had Harry Jerome running a 9.9 second 100. Some had 10.0, and they were just like, maybe we'll go on the side of caution and say he ran it at 10 flat. And then, of course, toward the end of the 20th century, we had a slew of sprinters. There was Ben Johnson, and then in the 90s there was Donovan Bailey. There was Bernie Surin, who I think was a world's silver medalist. And of course, now presently, heading into Paris, Andre DeGrasse and Aaron Brown are our best bets on the blocks. And we've had a pretty good relay team too, Neil.
Yeah, Paris 2024, not that far away, basically half a year. So it'll come quickly. Um, Remember, you can buy this book, the book we're going to cover today with Donovan Bailey, Undisputed. And you can buy this book and any of the others Nate just mentioned and any we've covered in our 7 seasons on our website, sportslit.ca. Click the link in each book section and yeah, buy these books and support these authors. So without further ado, 1996 100-meter Olympic champion and world champion, Donovan Bailey. And we're back on Sports Lit Season 7, Episode 4. And we got a very special guest today. The fastest man in the world, 1996 Olympic champion at 100 meters, Mr. Donovan Bailey. Donovan, welcome to the show. Welcome to Sports Lit.
Thanks for having me, Neil, man. This is great for having me on today. And, you know, it's already been a long day, but I'm ready for whatever you got for me.
Right. Thank you. Well, this podcast obviously focuses on sports books. We read every book cover to cover, page to page. And so we want to have the most informed conversation with you. And the thing that struck me right off the top was basically, I'll give you a bit of background. Caribbean culture has permeated Canada in a major way, and especially recently with pop culture. And I noticed in your narrative, it seemed very intentional and not passive in the way you wanted to define your upbringing to make sure it didn't fit convenient narratives that the average person may have about island culture and Jamaican culture. Were you very conscious of that and how this may be read and conceptions of how someone growing up in Jamaica may have come of age?
Yeah, very much so. You know what? I think that I wanted to point out in the book, you know, kind of like maybe more of our similarities, you know what I mean? As opposed to our differences. And also that I know that, you know, sometimes when you're maybe from a first world country and you're thinking about island life, you're thinking about, oh my God, you know, what do these people do? You know, what happens? And certainly for me, you know, church, school, and sports was what we did. I grew up on a farm, you know, so that's like sometimes you talk to like a typical Canadian person, go, you grew up on a farm in Jamaica. I'm like, yes, a farm where there's cows and goats and cats and dogs, and we grow carrots and potatoes, you know, and there's, you know what I mean? You know, so yes, the book was very intentional to kind of point out that there's so much that we all have in common, because I wanted to resonate with people from everywhere. I mean, my friends are a cross section of everybody. I mean, my closest people my closest friends are from everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, whether it's Asia, Eastern Europe, the Caribbean, like whatever. And, you know, our thing in common is probably sports or music or food or whatever, like whatever it is, we find that common place. But ultimately what we do, and obviously I address that in the book also, yeah, we are all comfortable with each other and each other's culture. So you can get to, you discuss, and you might disagree, but you respect it regardless.
And you talk about in the book, you write about in the book how, like, if you had a family gathering, you would see the whole spectrum, right? Like a redhead and someone that might look like they're from India. Yeah. And so when you came to Canada, you know, it wasn't some sort of shock. You'd already seen the wide array of I guess, ethnicities
yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I'm just saying to you, the motto in Jamaica is out of many, one people, right? So it is kind of funny when people go to Jamaica and they see some guy that looks like a tourist, and you find out that his parents or his or her parents might have moved there like in the 1800s and they're German, you know, or you know, like East Indian. It's you know, like you South Asian is huge in Jamaica. Chinese is huge in Jamaica. Of course, Black people. I mean, so you know, at the end of the day, I think the book for me was to kind of show people that, you know, Jamaica is also a melting pot. My family is a melting pot. Canada is a melting pot. So ultimately for me, I was never going to be really uncomfortable anywhere I'm going to be.
Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, Donovan, we had a Howard Bryant on last year, and he talked about how maybe in the 80s and 90s, people didn't talk a lot about who was holding the lens in media portrayal, so to speak. How much did writing this book just make you think how things have gone from where the media kind of built a narrative around an athlete of your generation to where an athlete, I'm thinking of maybe a star Canadian like Alphonso Davies, has way more avenues to tell their story?
Well, yeah. Well. I mean, great question. When I was competing at the height of my career, when I was the fastest man on the planet, you just had conventional media. That's all you had. So ultimately, if a reporter did not like you, if a reporter decides that they're gonna create some narrative about you, you had absolutely nothing. Like you essentially would have to go to another media person and another media house to try and attempt to change that. And ultimately, it's still of that writer's opinion or that interviewer's opinion as to how they present you. So writing the book, for me, it's again taking control of my own brand, my own narrative, my own truth. And yeah, like right now, post George Floyd and everything, and also post social media platforms, there is a lot of athletes now that can, one, they can say whatever the hell they want, and they can point out facts about themselves, and certainly can deny things that people who are trying to push them in a box or place some sort of negative narrative on them, they can certainly separate themselves from that. So it's so, for my book, it's so important, for me to actually point that out, correct some things that might have been in the media, but also show, because I do mention people like PK Subban and Alphonso Davies in the book, that, these guys have an opportunity now to, one, be themselves, utilize the platform for good, and also speak their truths.
And I just wonder too, looking back at it now, as on the your peak performance years as a man now, comfortably in middle age. What would kind of be how would your letter to your younger self begin?
Well, this might, letter to my younger self, there's not a whole lot I would change. A letter to my younger self would probably have been, be a little bit more patient. But I realize that I'm telling someone who's incredibly impatient to be a little more patient. And even if I sent that letter, I would probably tear it up. In my younger self would probably rip that letter up. But yeah, you know what? I think that, I think being patient is one of those things. The things that I preach back then are the same things I talk about now. Surround yourself with incredible people who are always going to support you. Continue to learn, understand. If you don't do the work, you're not going to get your desired results. So there's not a lot of things that I would probably put in a book that'd be different than my journey.
So the book is called Undisputed, and I at the end, right at the end, you kind of understand why it's called Undisputed. So I want to ask you point blank, where do you see yourself in the pantheon of Canadian sports history? Where is Donovan Bailey?
Well, my book's called Undisputed, Neil. And so there's no Canadian that's ever put on a Canadian uniform that has dominated a sport that is played in every country like I have. None. Percy Williams is an Olympic champion from 1928. Harry Jerome, also did quite well. I don't know anyone else who has been, an Olympic champion, a world champion, and a world record holder at a sport that's played around the globe. So, where do I rank in the pantheon? Well, I'm going to say on the top. So I'm on the top.
Undisputed.
Undisputed, absolutely.
So I'm just going to segue a little bit because this plays a big factor in the book. You do a really good job of explaining the nuance of Ben Johnson's legacy as it pertains to you.
Right.
How it's not cut and dry, but it's sort of black and white in a way too. So for those that haven't read the book, how does Ben Johnson kind of factor into your story, because it does in so many ways in the book, the way you're like always looking at your water bottle, or you're at a club and you're not letting your drink out of your sight. And then you also explain it from his perspective a little too. How is his story nuanced, and how does it pertain to you?
You know what? Wow, another good question. One, for those of you who don't know the story, go buy the book. That's what we need. We're here trying to get as many books off the shelves as possible. I need to be a bestseller because that's what I'm an athlete. I believe in winning. That's what we do. But yeah, I wanted to see. So here's a problem, Neil, especially in the Black community. There are people, and these are like, sometimes I've spoken to Black journalists. They're like, man, you've always been hard on Ben. And I'm like, no. I'm not at all hard on Ben. What I'm trying to point out to you is what, it's kind of like having a CEO of a company that CEO took the company bankrupt. And then I'm the new hire. And then when I come in, I have to undo every single thing that CEO did. There's absolutely no like emotional connection or physical connection to Ben at all. I mean, I've never had a conversation with Ben, so I don't really, even understand, kind of where people would get the idea that I don't like him. But I took over a sport where he was one of the biggest ambassadors on the planet. I started breaking world records. I am Canadian. I was born in Jamaica, so at the end of the day, I wanted to kind of separate that and understand, like, my support system and where I come from and all of those things. But more importantly, when I started competing, how it is that I viewed the officials. A lot of those who were, instrumental in, guiding Ben in what he did, and probably knew what he was doing, and they spent a whole lot of time, benefiting from his performances. But when he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar, he all of a sudden became some Jamaican Canadian guy. And so for that, my immense paranoia, obviously rear its ugly head, because I'm just like, I am never going to get into a place that I'm going to allow myself to be, to trust anyone, because I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea. Like, even if someone you sort of know, I have no idea who they might be. And ultimately, as we know, if you test positive somewhere, whatever excuse you come up with, there's no excuse, because you're supposed to know exactly you're supposed to manage your own self. So you have to know what food goes in your body, what you're drinking. You have to know, what's in your water bottle, what's in your coffee. You have to know if whatever vitamins you're taking, where it came from, and how that is. So you've never ever heard about someone testing positive in any sport whatsoever, and them not come up with some sort of what is perceived, and some of it rightfully so. There are people that have taken drugs intentionally, and certainly there are people that have ingested PEDs by mistake, right? So I wanted to make it clear in the book about what happened with Ben, my thoughts on it, my opinion on that, and also, like, you have to understand how much cortisol was built up in my body because of my paranoia to compete, post Ben Johnson for Canada, doing track and field, and the fact is how I had to manage myself, because you can never imagine, you could never come up with an excuse. Like, I couldn't be late for a drug test. You know what I mean? So it was imperative for me to tell that story.
And I mean, what you said right at the beginning of that answer, we certainly felt, and I'm sure I speak for Nate, when we were watching you come up, like, this is 8 years after Ben Johnson, and we're pulling for him, but you could feel it. We could see it. We could feel it through the TV screen. So, right. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, that made me wonder about, a phrase a friend of mine uses. It's the cost keeps costing. But that paranoia you speak of, like, how much did that stay with you over the years, or was it the case where you went down to work on the book and said, oh my goodness, like, this is where my head was at, 25, 30 years ago?
You know what? Listen, the paranoia is probably still here. I mean, I'm always conscious of where I am, always conscious of what I'm doing, always conscious of people around me. You just never know, right? But I'm just saying, I broke the world record and became the fastest human being on the planet. With all of with the headaches, dealing with obviously narrative in the media, dealing with not having support from the governing bodies, who a lot of them were supporting Ben. And still breaking world records, and still, bringing my teammates gold medals in the relay. Like, imagine if I didn't have any of those things and I had support, right? Because that's really how I think about it. Imagine if there was just complete and total freedom, like the kids have today, which is, I hope, which is kind of really my legacy. The kids today, our track team today, our sports team today can just go and play sports with a reckless abandonment. Now, imagine if I had that opportunity, how much better I would be, right? And those are the questions that I ask myself, because as I said in the book, I am the why kid. So imagine if I just had support and people were proactive in helping and assisting and cheerleading. The fact is, I would have gone and, whatever world records. I mean, I had 3 world records over my career. I have 1 now, but imagine how much better I would be if none of those things existed.
Yeah, when I'm the king around here, I think is what you said. And
yes,
yeah, well, we don't want to give everything away, but you're very forthright in dealing with I think it's the Athletics Canada and maybe the Canadian Olympic Committee.
Yeah, both. Yeah, the governing bodies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nate, I think you want to ask about a special coach. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was watching a couple of podcasts that Dan Paff was on. How would you describe his teaching, I guess, to anyone who wanted to teach someone else something?
I think Dan is the smartest, one of the smartest human beings I know. Dan is someone who has honed his craft over the years. And one of the things that I've learned from Dan is that you're constantly a student. You're always learning. You're always finding ways. You're always seeking new things. You're always evolving. And Dan is one of the few people I know that even when I was competing, I'd ask him a question. And if he didn't have the answer that day, he would say to me, "I'll get back to you." And in his network of people right around the planet, he would actually go home and read or call someone, and he'd have an answer the next day for me. And for me, he was constant. So for me, the cerebral connection that he and I had, that again allowed me, one, to trust him implicitly, right? And that allowed me that anytime he wrote any workout for me and my body type and my running style, it allowed me to just be, be like, thank you. I guess this is what I'm doing. I mean, there's lots of times I'd have pushback, but he goes, "Hey, are you trying to be the best? Are you trying to be the greatest?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, okay, well, that's the end of that argument. So Dan is one of the most smart. Dan is one of the smartest people that I know, because he lives by example. He absolutely lives and teaches by example, and every single day, even to this day, Dan will tell you that he's talking to someone about doing something and is constantly evolving. To this day, I think that Dan is still the best coach around, even today.
It's interesting. I've learned about Dan through that. I think there was a documentary about you that came out on TSN maybe 5 years ago, and so you learned a little bit about him then. But what was fascinating in this book is that this guy wasn't getting paid. You sent him I think it was a tracksuit or something with a bunch of cash when you hit it. I think World Championships when you won, and
yeah.
And later he's so like pure to the sport that he's training like pretty much anyone that wants to be good.
Yes, he would have trained both you guys. No, but he would have. No, understand this. Okay. Why I love Dan was this. I mean, and again, there's pockets of it in the book. Dan took me on essentially as a project. It's kind of like what Wayne Allison did at Sheridan College. But Daniel was extremely talented. But he took me on, and not one day did he ask me for $1. Not one day. And so this guy's a coach who never owned a house, never. And I was just like, my God, you never owned. Like, I thought it was funny. The first conversation I had with him about not owning a house. I'm like, you don't own a house? I bought my first house when I was 19. To me, that was a normal thing. And he said, no, never own a house. So it was after. So it wasn't after the World Championships, Neil. It was actually after my first season with him.
Oh, okay.
And I said to him, I asked him what size he wore a tracksuit, and then I stuffed that with cash for him to go buy a house. For real. So I'm just saying to you that imagine a coach who dedicates his life to coaching people because he loves it, right? I mean, I guess it's the same way when I left Dan at the end of 1997. I'm like, Dan, we own the sport around the world now. But then you have all of these slackers that have zero chance of doing anything. Like there were men that were training with us that Shelly Ann Fraser and Elaine Thompson would have had for dinner, right? I mean, but he would give them. He's like, oh, they're here. They want to improve. And Donovan, I gave you a chance. And I'm like, God, okay, you know what? Where am I gonna go? Right? And I'm like, where am I gonna go? Because I'm gonna ask you. You're the guy that knows everything about coaching. Where am I gonna go? Right? So yeah, Dan is awesome human being.
And then he's indirectly, when you leave, he's then indirectly coaching you through. I think your massage therapist, your other
chiropractor,
coach.
Right?
Yeah, chiropractor. So you guys had that connection, which is wild. So yeah, very interesting. And that was the part of the book. And we're almost at the lightning round, Donovan. Don't worry. That was what was interesting to me, was because I think most Canadians know you for that period of time from the first world championship win to the double gold and the Don't You Love Saturday Nights in Georgia to Michael Johnson at Skydome. And then they're like, okay, what was the rest? And how did that? So the Dan Pfaff separation is really a big turning point in the book.
Huge. Well, Dan and I separated. I went away and I got injured. I mean, and so the other thing that I point out also in the book, that anytime I'm having like major crisis, it seems like my body attacks itself. So I think that, funny enough, I blew my Achilles in 1998 because I was finished in Atlanta. I was gonna move back to be with Dan anyways, because it's kind of like I'm home, I miss home, he missed his kid, that sort of thing. I blew my Achilles, so essentially my career was over, right? And funny enough, a few years ago, my father passed away. I blew my Achilles, so it's almost like something that I cannot control. So it is very weird.
We'll go one question each, Nate, and then we'll go right into the lightning round. So Nate, you want me to go first, or you?
I will ask quickly. I just wondered, reading this book, and we're coming up on an Olympic year where all these people become once every 4 years experts in a sport. Points at self. But how much people learn about just the technical aspects of sprinting? Because to me, I was like, when you were talking about everything, I was just like, wow, this is almost like an Olympic 100. Almost is like something that's almost like a space shuttle launch. Like everything has to be right. Like how accurate is that to say?
Nathan, you know what? Funny. Thank you for that. I'm gonna use that because that's what it is.
It's yours.
No, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, ultimately, if you go into the Olympic finals, and you are the space shuttle, because nothing can go wrong. Absolutely nothing can go wrong. I mean, maybe in the 100 meters, you might have a nanosecond, to make a mistake corrected and move on. But that's exactly what it is. You have to go into the games, and the person who makes the least amount of mistakes is the winner. So, but it is like that. It 100%. It's never been mentioned, which I'm telling you, I'm going to steal it now. But it is like a space shuttle launch. Nothing like you have to prepare for every single thing and hope that nothing goes wrong, or hope you make as tiny a mistake as possible.
It's funny, before I get to my last question, someone was asking me the other day, we were watching the Pan Ams, and they're like, how did Maggie McNeil slow down in the heat? Like, how do they know how to just slow down when they don't need it? Like, it's crazy, right? You know your body so well that you can who is it that you pulled up on when you went over to your first international meet and you told them, I'm going to slow up, but I'm going to let you know I can beat you. I don't know who that was, but
it was Bruni at one point,
Right.
It was Bruni at the Francophone Games.
Yeah.
But then it was Frankie also. Frankie just before the Olympic Games.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm saying to you that the 100 meters, there's 3 parts to it. Mm-hmm. So understanding what you do in the blocks, understanding what it is that you have to do for the first 30 meters, understanding what you have to do for the middle 40 meters, and understanding for what you cannot do for the last 30 meters. So you're doing all of those things, like understanding this. You're maximizing power, but you are the most relaxed at the exact same time. That is the 100 meters.
Love it. Okay, love it. Lastly, before the lightning round, your business acumen comes up a lot in the book. You mentioned, well, you bought your first house at 19. I talked about intent earlier when you mentioned the intent, or I talked about the intent of how I thought you're trying to explain your origin story. Mm-hmm. This book seems to be written for an audience beyond Canada, because sometimes you're explaining, like, in Canada, this is the way it goes in a certain example. So when you were writing this book, did you make sure it was known that you wanted this book to be sold overseas and there'd be an audience for it overseas or in America or somewhere else?
Well, track and field, there's 220 countries or 215 countries in the world. Track and field or athletics is in every single one of them. So yes, we're selling books in every single country. And the other thing, Neil, that I thought it's pretty important is that our sport, number one, is global, but I think sometimes there's such negative narratives. As a proud mama's boy, a proud Black man, you don't speak enough about your mom. You don't speak enough about your dad. There's not enough of that that's out there. And so the book itself, I just really want to point out that how as I'm a parent, right? Mm-hmm. And both of you guys had parents or have parents. Yeah. So I'm just trying to point out how similar we are. And the fact is that all you want when you have a kid is that kid to grow up, whether or not, if that kid has a passion, you want to help fuel that passion. If that kid wants to be a doctor or be educated, help fuel that. My journey, is track and field. So that has opened doors in the 195 countries I've been to in the world. That's opened a door in every single one of those countries where I've gone and met with like every heads of state. I've gone into many boardrooms. I'm very comfortable with myself. And so the book is hopefully a motivating factor for kids around the globe that have a dream. I don't care what the dream is, right? Just whatever dream you've got, understand that no one should be capable of putting you in a box, and no one should be trying to limit you in the ideas and the things that you can do.
Well, to our global audience, you can buy the book on our website. So if you're listening to this anywhere outside of Canada, click the link. Okay, so lightning round. You can't call yourself a world champ unless you're competing in an international event, says Noah Lyles. Took a lot of heat. Do you agree or not?
Of course. I agree. Well, I said it. I said it then. I mean, listen, I'm a huge basketball fan. I'm actually a basketball head, and I prefer that's probably the sport I prefer to play today. And Noah was right. The NBA is made up of the greatest basketball players on the planet, but it is American cities playing each other plus the Raptors. So and when you win the NBA championships, the anthem that's played is either Canada or the US. Right. So Noah was 100% correct.
You know what? You're absolutely right, by the way, and I agree with you too. I think only in America would you call yourself the world champion and not be competing in an international event. Okay, go ahead, Nate.
Okay, Andre DeGrasse has run a 9.8900. Will he go sub 9.84 and break your national record?
Listen, I hope so. I mean, my Canadian record now was the world record when I ran. So ultimately, and I've said to him, I've said to Aaron, I've said to all the kids, I'm like, dude, it's 984. It's I know it's a phenomenal time still, but technically, if you look at what a lot of these kids are running with the shoe technology and nutrition and the technology of the track, all the things that are happening, all the like the training technical things, you should have broken it a long time ago. So I am a huge supporter, of the kids breaking the Canadian record. But ultimately, me being undisputed, for any of these kids in Canada to be world champion, Olympic champion, and world record holder, that's going to be a tough hill because, 20 some odd years ago, I was the fastest man in history of the world. The fastest time in the history of the world right now is a very talented man by the name of Usain Bolt. And for any of these kids to even equal what I've done, they have to run 9:57 and then come back and break the relay. Man, it's a tough haul. But yeah, I'm certainly cheering on these young cats for them to come out and at least, be the fastest guy in Canadian history. But I want them to strive higher like I did when I was the fastest man. I was the number one sprinter on the planet and the fastest man in history.
If Michael Johnson was chicken, what does that make Lamont Marcel Jacobs?
Oh my God. Oh, you know what? I like Marcel Jacobs. I do. I think that I do. I think that Marcel is one of the most talented sprinters out there. I mean, like the guy ran the time. He ran 980, and his time didn't lie. I think he's a big, strong kid. He's training with Andre this year. Hopefully, he can get. I guess I can say balls. He can get some balls and not worry about like the people that are out there and his competitors or the media or the criticism that he's receiving online. He can kind of eliminate that. And I think that he should be a factor in Paris, man. Marcel, I'm cheering you on, my boy.
One more each, Nate. Go.
Yeah. What nation has the greatest potential in track and field that the wider public doesn't know about yet?
Oh God, there's a few actually. Great question, Nathan. Japan. It's always been. I mean, these guys. You see them in every year in the relay. Phenomenal talent. There's always great talent coming out of Australia. The African countries that were always known for distance running, they have discovered that they got some speed. Botswana, Letsile Tobago, it's probably will be the greatest factor in the 1 and the 200 meter over the next couple of years. Ferdinand Amanyala from Kenya. Again, Kenyans are known for distance running. So I think that the African region, so we can pull out many countries out of Africa, countries that are traditionally known for distance running. There's huge potential. Canadians on a whole. I mean, I still think that we can tap into probably more resources and get a lot of our kids in Canada to either go way down south and prepare down south and kind of get the attitude and the confidence to compete on the world stage. But you know what? So that's my quick, what's that, 4 countries? Yeah.
Okay, last question.
4 to 8, I guess.
Yeah, 4 to 8. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, my math is not good. It's early.
Last question, and again, this has been great because you mentioned you want people to know about your family, global, sell this book, and understand you and where you came from, how it started, and what happened, and how you are where you are now. I want to ask you this question: what John Holt song reminds you most of your father?
God, don't say that, man. Man, you'd have to give me a couple.
Oh, well, I mean,
now you're tripping me out because now I feel embarrassed. I mean, that's my dad's favorite.
There's
musician.
too many to name. It's
him, Dennis Brown,
yeah.
Gregory Isaacs. Jesus, you're killing me, Neil.
You took your dad to a John Holt concert, right? Like that was in the book. Like
funny enough, and I sang along to a whole bunch of them, and you are now stomping me in the middle of the morning. How dare you do that, bro?
My bad. Listen, we had the Undisputed champ on today. I know I speak for myself and Nate. We had a thrill back in the 90s watching you. There was nobody like you.
Yeah, this was amazing.
yeah, thanks again for making the time. I know a lot of people want your time, and it's good of you to give us a half an hour today.
Well, listen, thank you. Thank you for having me. And you know what? In your entire audience, please go out and buy the book. And to all the sports fans and my incredible support system around the globe, thank God. I mean, I am blessed and humbled to have shared some incredible sporting moments with you all. I hope this book brings back awesome, pleasant memories. I hope you get to know me a little bit more, and share it, buy it, give it to your friends for Christmas. Have a good day, fellas.
Thank you so much.